The phone call came at 2:47 p.m. on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, interrupting my review of architectural blueprints for the new veterans housing complex I was designing. My grandmother's voice, usually warm as fresh-baked bread, trembled with barely contained hurt as she delivered news that would shatter our family's careful facade of normalcy. "Michael, sweetheart, I'm calling to let you know that Grandpa and I won't be coming to Thanksgiving dinner this year." She paused, and I could hear her struggling to maintain composure. "Your father called," he said. "He said Veronica doesn't want us there, that we'd make things uncomfortable for her family." My name is Michael Harrison. I'm 38 years old, and I work as an architect specializing in adaptive housing for elderly and disabled veterans. It's meaningful work that grew from watching my grandparents age in a house that became increasingly difficult for them to navigate, and from hearing my grandfather's stories about fellow soldiers who came home to a country unprepared to accommodate their needs. But nothing in my professional experience dealing with accessibility challenges had prepared me for the inaccessibility of my own father's heart. "Grandma, that can't be right," I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were hollow. This had been building for months, ever since my father had married Veronica Ashford, now Harrison, 14 months ago. "Let me call Dad. There must be some misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding, dear." The resignation in her voice was worse than tears would have been. He was quite clear. "Veronica's family has certain expectations, and your grandfather and I apparently don't meet them." Veronica's family, the Ashfords of Westchester, with their hedge fund fortune and their charity galas and their casual cruelty dressed up as good breeding. My father, David Harrison, had married into their world with the desperate eagerness of a man who'd spent 58 years feeling like he'd never quite measured up to his own father's legacy. Now he had the trophy wife, the Connecticut estate, and the social status he'd always craved. All it had cost him was his soul. "Where is Grandpa?" I asked, already grabbing my keys. "In his workshop. You know how he gets when he's upset. He's been out there for 2 hours, pretending to fix that old radio that hasn't worked since 1987. My grandfather, Colonel James Harrison, retired, dealt with emotional pain the way he'd dealt with physical pain during 2 tours in Korea and 1 in Vietnam, by finding something to do with his hands and refusing to acknowledge that anything was wrong. He'd built half the furniture in their house during my grandmother's cancer scare 10 years ago, refinished the entire deck when my father first started pulling away, and was apparently now resurrecting dead electronics rather than face the fact that his only son had chosen his new wife's comfort over his parents' company. "I'm coming over," I said. "Oh, Michael, you don't need to." "I'm coming over," I repeated, firmer this time. "And Grandma? Start making your stuffing. The one with the chestnuts that Grandpa pretends he doesn't like but always takes seconds of. You're having Thanksgiving dinner, just maybe not where you expected." I heard her smile through the phone. Yes, you can hear smiles if you know someone well enough. "You're a good boy, Michael. Always have been. I learned from the best. See you in 20 minutes. The drive from my downtown Denver loft to my grandparents' house in Lakewood usually took 30 minutes. I made it in 18, my Tesla's autopilot features ignored in favor of manual control and speeds that would have made my insurance company weep. All the while, my mind raced through the progression of slights and exclusions that had led to this moment. It had started small after the wedding. Forgotten invitations to Sunday dinners. Calls that went unreturned. Plans canceled at the last minute with increasingly flimsy excuses. My father, who had once visited his parents weekly, now treated them like distant relatives he was obligated to acknowledge at major holidays. And Veronica treated them like antiques that clashed with her modern aesthetic. I'd watched it happen with growing anger but had tried to stay neutral, hoping my father would come to his senses. My mistake was believing he had any sense left when it came to Veronica. She'd appeared in his life 2 years after my mother's death, when grief and loneliness had made him vulnerable to anyone who showed interest. The fact that she was 23 years younger, conventionally beautiful, and came from money had overridden every warning sign, including the way she looked at his parents like they were stains on her Hermes blazer. My grandparents' house sat on a corner lot in one of Lakewood's older neighborhoods, a 1950s ranch that they'd bought new when Grandpa came home from Korea. It had good bones. I should know. I'd drawn up renovation plans for them 3 times over the years. But they always declined, saying they liked it just the way it was. Every room held memories. Every imperfection told a story. It was the antithesis of my father's new Connecticut mansion, and that was probably part of why Veronica found it so distasteful. I pulled into the driveway beside Grandpa's ancient Ford pickup, a vehicle that Veronica had once referred to as that eyesore and suggested should be donated to whatever charity takes scrap metal. The fact that Grandpa had rebuilt that engine 3 times, that it had carried supplies for countless Habitat for Humanity projects, that it represented his independence and capability, none of that mattered to someone who measured worth in market value. Grandma met me at the door before I could knock. At 87, Eleanor Harrison moved more slowly than she once had, but her eyes were sharp as the day she'd first spotted my grandfather across a USO dance floor in 1953. Those eyes were red-rimmed now, though she'd carefully reapplied her makeup to hide the evidence of tears. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled of lavender and vanilla extract. "You didn't need to rush over here. We're fine." "No, you're not," I said, hugging her back. "And neither am I. This is bullshit, Grandma." She pulled back, giving me the look she'd perfected when I was 8 and had discovered profanity. "Language, Michael. Sorry. This is nonsense." "Better?" "Marginally." She stepped aside to let me in, though I might have used stronger language myself when your father called. Your grandfather certainly did. I haven't heard some of those words since his army days. The house smelled like home, coffee brewing perpetually in the kitchen, lemon pledge from Grandma's weekly dusting, and underneath it all, the indefinable scent of lives well lived. The walls were covered with photographs spanning 7 decades. Their wedding, my father as a baby, family vacations, military ceremonies, my college graduation. A visual history of a family that my father was now willing to abandon for the approval of people who didn't deserve to clean my grandparents' shoes. "Where is he really?" I asked. "Workshop, like I said. He's graduated from the radio to the toaster that's been working perfectly fine for 30 years. She sighed. "You know how he is. He'd rather fix appliances than admit his son broke his heart." I found Grandpa exactly where expected, bent over his workbench with the concentration of a surgeon. At 89, Colonel James Harrison still cut an imposing figure 6 feet tall even with the slight stoop age had given him, shoulders broad from a lifetime of physical work, hands steady despite the arthritis he never complained about. He wore his everyday uniform, khaki work pants, a flannel shirt, and the Korea veteran cap I'd bought him 5 years ago that he'd initially called too flashy, but now never left the house without. "That toaster give you any trouble, we can arrest it for insubordination," I said from the doorway. He didn't look up, but I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. "Smartass. You get that from your grandmother's side." "Pretty sure I get it from the man who convinced his drill sergeant that the entire barracks had food poisoning to get them out of a 20-mile march. That was tactical brilliance, not smartassery." He finally set down his screwdriver and turned to face me. "Your grandmother called you." "She did. Told you not to come to Thanksgiving." "She mentioned something about that, yeah?" He studied me with eyes that had seen too much but somehow hadn't grown cynical. "And you drove over here like a bat out of hell to do what exactly? Fight your father? Demand he change his mind? Storm the castle and rescue the ancient dragons?" I drove over here to have coffee with my grandparents and discuss our Thanksgiving plans. You know, the ones where you come to my place and we eat too much and watch football and don't have to deal with Veronica's family looking at you like you're exhibits in a museum of what not to become. Your father's house, his rules, Grandpa said, but the words came out hollow. His house, her rules, I corrected. And her rules seem to include pretending you don't exist. When's the last time he visited? When's the last time he called just to talk? Not because Grandma guilted him into it. Grandpa turned back to the toaster, but not before I saw the flash of pain across his face. He's busy. New wife, new life. It happens. It happens when people let it happen. When they choose comfort over character. I moved into the workshop, noting the projects in various stages of completion. A jewelry box that looked suspiciously like it was sized for the antique brooch Grandma wore on special occasions. A picture frame that would perfectly fit the photo of their 65th anniversary party. A small shelf unit that would solve the book storage problem in their bedroom. Even upset, Grandpa showed love through creation. How long are you going to let him treat you like this? Like what? He picked up a different screwdriver, apparently finding fault with the toaster's bottom plate now. He's not treating us like anything. He's just moving on. People do that. People abandon their parents for social climbing opportunities? That's normal to you. Watch your tone, son. The Colonel voice, rarely used but instantly recognizable. He's still your father. Still my boy. He's a 58-year-old man who just told his parents they're not welcome at Thanksgiving because his new wife thinks you're embarrassing. The screwdriver slipped, scratching across the metal with a sound like fingernails on a chalkboard. Grandpa's hands that had held steady through firefights and surgery and decades of life's tremors, shook slightly as he set the tool down. Is that what he said? Embarrassing? I realized Grandma hadn't told him everything. Grandma said Veronica doesn't want you there, that you'd make things uncomfortable for her family. Uncomfortable. He tested the word like it was a foreign language. I commanded a battalion. I've briefed generals. I've had dinner with senators. But I make the Ashfords uncomfortable. You make them uncomfortable because you're real. Because you earned everything you have instead of inheriting it. Because you represent values they've never had to develop. I pulled up a stool, settling in for what I knew would be a long conversation. And because Veronica knows that you see right through her. She makes him happy, Grandpa said, though it sounded more like a question than a statement. She makes him feel important. There's a difference. I picked up a wrench, turning it over in my hands just to have something to do. Apparently, the Harrison men all dealt with emotion through manual occupation. Remember what you told me when I was dating Rachel? About the difference between someone who loves you and someone who loves what you represent. Rachel had been my college girlfriend, beautiful and ambitious and utterly devoted to the idea of being an architect's wife without much interest in the architect himself. Grandpa had seen through her in about 5 minutes, though it had taken me 2 years to catch up. That was different, he said. How? You were 22. Your father is. He paused, searching for words. He's trying to be something he thinks he should have been all along. Veronica represents that. Success, sophistication, acceptance into circles that were always closed to us. Circles that you never wanted to enter in the first place. No, but he did. Always. Grandpa's voice grew distant, traveling back through decades. Even as a boy, David wanted more. Not just more money or things, but more prestige, I suppose. Your grandmother and I, we were happy with our life. Good jobs, good house, good family. But it was never enough for him. And now he has his more, I said. All it cost was his parents. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of that truth settling over the workshop like dust. Then Grandpa straightened, the colonel reasserting himself over the wounded father. Well, standing around feeling sorry for ourselves won't get Thanksgiving dinner made. He looked at me with those sharp eyes. You mentioned something about plans? My place. 2 o'clock. I'll cook. And before you say anything, yes, I can cook now. YouTube University taught me. Grandma brings the stuffing and her sweet potato casserole. You bring your appetite and maybe that bottle of whiskey you think Grandma doesn't know you hide behind the paint cans. She knows about that? Grandpa, she knows about all of them. The one behind the paint cans, the one in the old ammunition box, the one you keep in the truck's toolbox. She's been married to you for 68 years. You think you have secrets? He chuckled. The first genuine humor I'd heard from him since I arrived. That woman's sneakier than a North Korean patrol. She's a Harrison woman. We expect nothing less. I stood, clapping him on the shoulder. So, Thanksgiving at my place? No Ashfords, no judgment. No pretending to be something we're not. You sure you want 2 old fossils cluttering up your fancy loft? My fancy loft has grab bars in the bathroom and a walk-in shower specifically designed for accessibility because I'm an architect who thinks about these things. It's literally designed for old fossils. I grinned. Plus, my TV is bigger than yours. The lions will look even worse in 4K. The lions always look worse in high definition. He set the toaster aside, apparently deciding it would live to toast another day. All right, Thanksgiving at your place. But I'm bringing my own cranberry sauce. That canned stuff you young people eat is an abomination. Deal. Now let's go tell Grandma before she stress bakes enough cookies to feed an army. We found Grandma in the kitchen, as expected, surrounded by the early stages of what would clearly become a baking marathon if left unchecked. She had flour in her silver hair and determination in her eyes. Michael's invited us for Thanksgiving, Grandpa announced. I said yes. We're bringing cranberry sauce and whatever you're making that smells like heaven. Snickerdoodles, she said absently, then processed what he'd said. Oh, but Michael, we couldn't impose. You probably have plans with friends. Or that nice girl from your firm. The nice girl from my firm is married to another nice girl from my firm, and they're going to Hawaii for Thanksgiving. My plans are spending the day with my grandparents, eating too much, and being grateful for family that actually acts like family. She looked between us, her eyes bright with unshed tears. You're sure? I'm sure. Besides, someone needs to help me break in my kitchen. I spent a fortune on appliances I barely know how to use. Well, in that case, she wiped her hands on her apron, the one I'd made her in middle school home economics that said "World's Best Grandma" in crooked embroidery. I suppose I should make my list. We'll need fresh herbs and good butter, not that margarine nonsense. And vegetables from the farmer's market, if it's still open. As she bustled around making notes, I caught Grandpa watching her with an expression of such profound love it made my chest tight. 68 years, and he still looked at her like she hung the moon. This was what my father was choosing to exclude from his life. This was what Veronica found uncomfortable. I stayed for dinner, Grandma insisted, and Grandma's insistence was like gravity, theoretically resistible but practically inevitable. We ate pot roast and mashed potatoes and green beans from their garden, and talked about everything except my father. It was comfortable and familiar and exactly what home should feel like. As I was leaving, Grandma pressed a container of cookies into my hands. For the road, she said, though my road was 20 minutes of city driving. Thanks, Grandma, for dinner and everything. Thank you, sweetheart, for standing up for us, for making us feel wanted. She glanced back toward the living room where Grandpa was pretending to watch the news. He won't say it, but this broke his heart. Having you here, having somewhere to go, it means everything. You're not going anywhere, I said firmly. You're coming home. My home is your home. Always. She patted my cheek, a gesture that made me feel 8 years old in the best way. Drive safe. And Michael? Maybe don't tell your father about our plans. Not yet. Let him think we're having sandwiches and sadness. It'll make the truth more impactful later. There was a glint in her eye that reminded me that Eleanor Harrison hadn't survived the Depression, raised a family, and kept Colonel James Harrison in line for nearly 7 decades by being a pushover. She had plans percolating behind that grandmotherly exterior. My lips are sealed, I promised. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. I actually could cook. That hadn't been a lie. But Thanksgiving dinner for 3 was different from my usual repertoire of bachelor meals and occasional dinner parties. I found myself texting Grandma constantly. How long for a 12-pound turkey? What temperature for the rolls? Is it stuffing or dressing, and what's the difference? Her responses were patient and detailed, often accompanied by photos of her own preparations. She was in full Thanksgiving mode, despite the reduced guest list, and I realized this was her coping mechanism. If she couldn't feed her son, she'd feed her grandson twice as hard. Wednesday night, I was elbow-deep in turkey prep when my phone rang. That I considered not answering, but curiosity won. Hello, Michael. His voice had that careful neutrality he used in court, giving nothing away. I wanted to talk to you about tomorrow. What about it? Your mother, that is, Veronica, wanted me to make sure you understood the dress code. Business casual, nothing too formal, but definitely no jeans. Her family has certain standards. Good to know, I said, not mentioning that I'd be wearing jeans and a comfortable sweater while eating turkey with people who loved me. Anything else? Yes, actually. He paused, and I could hear him choosing his words. Your grandparents. Have you spoken to them? Why? I wanted to make sure they understood. About tomorrow. That it's nothing personal. Nothing personal? I couldn't keep the incredulity out of my voice. Dad, you banned your parents from Thanksgiving dinner because your wife doesn't want them there. How is that not personal? It's not a ban. It's just, this year with understand. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're choosing your new in-laws over your actual parents. It looks like you're embarrassed by the people who raised you, supported you, loved you unconditionally. It looks like you've decided that Veronica's comfort matters more than your parents' dignity. You don't understand, he said, his court voice cracking slightly. The dynamics are complicated. Veronica's family, they have certain expectations. And those expectations include pretending your parents don't exist? Of course not. We'll see them another time. Maybe Friday, or over the weekend. When the important people have left, you mean? When there's no risk of the Ashfords seeing where you actually came from. That's enough, Michael. The dad voice now, the one that used to mean groundings and lost privileges. I don't have to explain my decisions to you. I'm trying to build something here, create a life that doesn't include your parents. Got it. Well, good luck with that, Dad. I hope the Ashfords' approval is worth what you're paying for it. I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking with anger. The turkey, innocent victim of my emotions, received a perhaps more aggressive herb rubbing than strictly necessary. My phone immediately lit up with texts from him, which I ignored. Then Veronica started texting, which I also ignored. The last one caught my eye before I blocked her number. You're being difficult about this is exactly why we need boundaries with David's family. Some people just don't understand civility. Civility? Is that what we were calling cruelty now? Thursday morning dawned crisp and clear. One of those perfect November days that made Denver shine. I was up at 6, starting the turkey and prepping sides. By 9, my loft smelled like Thanksgiving, and I had flour in my hair from an ill-advised attempt at homemade rolls. Grandma called at 10. "How's the bird?" "In the oven and not on fire, so I'm calling it a win." "How are you doing?" "Oh, fine. Your grandfather's been up since dawn, polishing his shoes and ironing his shirt. He wants to look nice for dinner." My heart clenched. Even excluded and hurt, Grandpa was approaching this with dignity. "Tell him to wear whatever's comfortable. This is family, not a fashion show." "I will." "Oh, and Michael? I may have made a few extra pies. In case." "In case what?" "In case a basketball team shows up." "How many is a few?" "4. Well, 5 if you count the cheesecake, but that's not technically a pie." "Grandma, there are 3 of us." "I know, dear, but baking helps me think." She paused. "Do you suppose your father is thinking about us at all today?" The hurt in her voice made me want to drive to Connecticut and shake my father until his priorities realigned. "I don't know, Grandma, but we're thinking about each other, and that's what matters." "You're right. Of course you're right. We'll see you at 2. Looking forward to it." I spent the rest of the morning cooking and cleaning, making sure everything was perfect. Not Ashford perfect, with its emphasis on appearance over substance, but Harrison perfect, warm, welcoming, and real. At 1:45 my phone rang. Unknown Connecticut number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Is this Michael Harrison?" The voice was cultured, cold, and unmistakably Ashford. "Yes. This is Patricia Ashford, Veronica's mother. I understand there's been some unpleasantness regarding today's arrangements." "If by unpleasantness you mean my father banning his parents from Thanksgiving, then yes." "No one was banned, young man. We simply felt it would be more comfortable for everyone if the gathering remained intimate." Intimate, meaning exclusive, meaning appropriate. I'm sure you can understand that mixing social circles can be challenging. Different backgrounds, different comfort levels. "Lady, my grandfather commanded soldiers from every background imaginable. He's had dinner with people who spoke 6 languages, none of them English. He's more comfortable in mixed company than you probably are." "Yes, well." Her voice could have frozen water. "Military service is certainly admirable. But this is a social occasion, not a barracks. We have certain standards. Standards that exclude war heroes but include what? People who inherited their money instead of earning it? People who've never sacrificed anything more significant than a bad stock option. I don't appreciate your tone, and I don't appreciate your existence. So we're even." I hung up, added the number to my block list, and went back to basting the turkey. By 1:55, everything was ready. The table was set with my grandmother's china. She'd insisted I take it last Christmas, saying it needed to be used, not just displayed. The turkey was resting, the sides were warming, and the apartment smelled like everything Thanksgiving should be. At exactly 2 o'clock, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find my grandparents, dressed in their Sunday best despite my casual instructions, carrying enough food to feed 20 people. "Grandma," I said, "just stuffing and sweet potatoes." "Well, yes, but then I thought you might like that green bean casserole you always loved, and the rolls in case yours didn't turn out, and a few other things." She bustled past me, already taking inventory of my kitchen. "Oh, Michael, it smells wonderful in here." Grandpa followed more slowly, carrying a suspicious bag that clinked. "Brought reinforcements," he said, pulling out not 1 but 3 bottles of good whiskey. "Figured we might need options." "Grandpa, are you planning to drink all of that?" "Not all at once." He set the bottles on my bar, arranging them with military precision. "But a man should be prepared. Besides, one's for cooking." "Which one?" Haven't decided yet. Depends on how the day goes. We settled into the comfortable rhythm of family preparing a meal together. Grandma commandeered my kitchen with the efficiency of a general taking territory, improving everything I'd made with small touches. A pinch of sage here, a pat of butter there. Grandpa appointed himself quality control, sampling everything to make sure it's safe. This stuffing needs more testing, he announced, taking his third spoonful. Could be poisoned. The only thing poisoned around here is going to be you if you don't stop eating before dinner. Grandma scolded, but she was smiling. This was what Thanksgiving was supposed to be. Not the formal, staged production my father was probably orchestrating in Connecticut, but this family cooking together, laughing together, just being together. We were about to sit down to dinner when my phone rang. Dad again. I almost ignored it, but something, maybe the holiday spirit, maybe morbid curiosity, made me answer. Michael, thank God. He sounded breathless, panicked. Are your grandparents with you? Why? Just, are they? Yes, we're about to have dinner. The dinner they should be having with you. I need to speak to them. Right now. They don't want to talk to you right now, Dad. They're trying to salvage some joy from the holiday you ruined. Michael, please. This is important. Something's happened. Despite myself, I felt a flutter of concern. What kind of something? Just, can I talk to them? Please. I looked at my grandparents, who were watching me with curiosity. Dad wants to talk to you, I said to Grandpa. Says something's happened. Grandpa's face went carefully neutral. He held out his hand for the phone. David. He listened for a moment, his expression shifting from neutral to confused to something I couldn't quite read. Slow down, son. What do you mean? I see. Yes. Yes, we're fine. We're at Michael's. A longer pause. David, I don't... All right. We'll talk about it later. He handed the phone back to me. He wants to talk to you. Dad. Michael. His voice was strange, strained. I need you to know something. This morning, after we spoke yesterday, I couldn't stop thinking about what you said, about the price of the Ashfords' approval. So I may have had too much to drink at breakfast. Dad. And I may have told Richard Ashford exactly what I thought of his family's standards. In detail, with extensive profanity. I nearly dropped the phone. You did what? It gets worse. Veronica sided with them, said I was an embarrassment, that I was proving why she'd been right to exclude my parents, that they'd clearly raised me without proper manners or social awareness. What did you do? I told her that my parents had more class in their little fingers than her entire family had in their investment portfolios. Then I might have thrown the gravy boat. It was very expensive, apparently part of some historic china set. Dad. I was struggling not to laugh, which seemed inappropriate given the gravity in his voice. They left. All of them. Packed up before dinner and left. Veronica went with them. He paused. She's at her parents' house. With her lawyer. Are you okay? He laughed, but it was hollow. I'm sitting in a 20-room house with a $40,000 Thanksgiving dinner that no one's eating, realizing I chose all of this over the only people who actually loved me. So no, Michael, I'm not okay. I looked at my grandparents, who were pretending not to listen while clearly hanging on every word. Where are you now? Still at the house. Drinking wine that costs more than most people's car payments and wondering when I became such an ass. Language, I said automatically, channeling Grandma. Sorry. When I became such a colossal ass. He paused. I don't suppose... No, that's too much to ask. What? Nothing. It's nothing. Enjoy your dinner. Tell Mom and Dad. Tell them I'm sorry. For everything. He hung up before I could respond. I looked at my grandparents, who were watching me expectantly. He told off the Ashfords, I reported. Through a gravy boat. Veronica left with her parents. Good Lord, Grandma breathed. On Thanksgiving? Apparently he remembered he had a spine, I said. Took him long enough to use it. Don't be cruel, Grandpa said quietly. He's still your father. Still my son. He hurt you. Yes, and now he's hurting. That doesn't make it right, but it doesn't make celebrating his pain right either. We sat in silence for a moment, the beautiful dinner cooling on the table. Finally, Grandma spoke. How far is Connecticut from here? Grandma, no. How far, Michael? About 4 hours by car. 3 if you drive like Dad taught me. I looked between them. You're not seriously thinking about going there. He's alone on Thanksgiving, Grandma said simply. No one should be alone on Thanksgiving. He chose to be alone when he uninvited you, and now he's chosen differently. Grandpa stood, his decision made. We'll take some plates to go. He'll need food. This is insane. I looked between them. He banned you from his house. He chose his trophy wife over his parents. He's been treating you like embarrassments for over a year. And you want to drive 4 hours to Connecticut to bring him turkey? Yes, they said in unison. Why? Because that's what family does, Grandma said. We show up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. He doesn't deserve it. Deserve's got nothing to do with it, Grandpa said. Love isn't about what people deserve. It's about what they need. And right now, your father needs his family. I stared at them. These incredible people who could find forgiveness where I could only find anger. You're better people than I am. No, Grandma said, starting to pack up food. We're just older. We've had more time to learn that holding on to hurt is like holding on to hot coals. You're the only one who gets burned. If we're doing this, I said, surrendering to the inevitable, we're taking my car. It's got better safety features and heated seats. You're coming. Grandpa seemed surprised. You think I'm letting my 80-something grandparents drive to Connecticut alone on Thanksgiving night? Besides, someone needs to document this insanity. This is either going to be a beautiful reunion or a complete disaster, and either way, I want a front row seat. We packed up the dinner with military efficiency. Turkey, sides, and definitely pie. Grandma insisted on the pie. Nothing says forgiveness like homemade apple pie, she declared, which seemed like something that should be embroidered on a pillow. Within 30 minutes, we were on the road. I drove while Grandpa navigated and Grandma called my father to let him know we were coming. David? It's Mom. No, don't argue. Just listen. We're bringing dinner. Yes, to Connecticut. We'll be there by 7. She paused. Because you're our son and it's Thanksgiving. That's all the reason we need. The drive was surprisingly pleasant. Grandpa told stories about my father as a child, how he'd always been ambitious, always reaching for something just out of grasp. Grandma shared memories of Thanksgivings past, the disasters and triumphs that had shaped their family traditions. By the time we reached the Connecticut state line, I'd learned more about my father's childhood than I'd ever known. He was always afraid, Grandma said quietly as we drove through the gathering dusk. Afraid he wasn't smart enough, successful enough, good enough. I never understood where it came from. We tried to love him past it, but some fears run too deep for love to reach. Veronica fed that fear, I said, made him feel like he'd finally made it, finally became the person he was supposed to be. No, Grandpa corrected. She made him feel like he could become someone else entirely. That's different, and ultimately impossible. We found the house easily. It was the kind of place that stood out even in a neighborhood of mansions. 3 stories of stone and glass, lit up like a Christmas display, circular driveway empty except for my father's Mercedes. The statement of wealth was so aggressive it was almost embarrassing. "Good Lord," Grandma murmured. "It looks like a hotel. 20 rooms," I said. "He gave me the tour last Christmas. There's an entire wing they don't even use." "Wasteful," Grandpa declared, which was as close to judgment as he usually got. I parked and we sat for a moment, gathering courage. Then Grandma straightened her shoulders and opened her door. "Come on, boys. That turkey's not getting any warmer." My father answered the door before we could ring the bell. He looked terrible, suit wrinkled, tie askew, eyes red-rimmed. The smell of expensive scotch wafted off him in waves. "Mom," he said, and his voice broke. "Dad, you came." "Of course we came," Grandma said briskly, pushing past him with her containers. "Now show me to the kitchen. This food needs reheating and you need coffee." We invaded his sterile mansion with warmth and purpose. Grandma took over the kitchen, a space larger than her entire house, while Grandpa and I set about making the formal dining room less formal. We pushed aside the elaborate centerpiece, ignored the place cards that had been meant for Ashfords, and set 4 places close together at one end of the massive table. "This is," my father said, watching us transform his showpiece into something livable. "You don't have to." "Sit," Grandpa ordered. "You look like hell." "I feel like hell." Dad slumped into a chair. "I ruined everything." "You ruined nothing that wasn't already broken," Grandpa said. "Maybe now you can build something real." While Grandma worked her magic in the kitchen, I sat with my father and grandfather in the living room. The space was gorgeous, professionally decorated, obviously, but cold. No family photos, no personal touches, just expensive furniture and art that probably cost more than my annual salary. "How did I get here?" Dad asked, staring at his hands. "How did I become someone who bans his own parents from Thanksgiving?" "You got scared," Grandpa said simply. "Scared that who you were wasn't enough. So you tried to become someone else. It never works, son. Trust me, I've seen plenty of men try." "Veronica made me feel important," Dad admitted. "Like I'd finally made it. Proved that a kid from Lakewood could run with the big dogs." "You were always important," I said, "to the people who mattered. But that wasn't enough for you." "No," he agreed. "It wasn't. And now I've lost everything that actually was important." "You haven't lost us," Grandma said from the doorway. "Dinner's ready. Come eat." We gathered around the too big table, dwarfed by the formal dining room but creating our own pocket of warmth. Grandma had performed miracles with the reheated food, making it seem fresh-made. We held hands for grace, something we hadn't done in years, and Grandpa's voice was strong as he gave thanks. "For family," he said. "Both the family we're born into and the family we choose to be. For forgiveness freely given. For second chances and new beginnings. And for turkey that survived a 4-hour road trip. Amen." "Amen," we echoed, and I felt something shift in the room. Not a dramatic reconciliation, not a magic erasing of hurt, but a small step toward healing. We ate and talked carefully at first, then with growing ease. Dad told us about the morning's explosion, how Richard Ashford had called my grandparents, those people one too many times, how something had snapped inside him. The gravy boat had been a particular point of pride. Apparently it had belonged to some Revolutionary War general. "Good," Grandma said firmly. "Some things deserve to be broken." "Veronica's filing for divorce," Dad said quietly. "Her lawyer called while you were driving here. Apparently throwing historic china is grounds for immediate separation." I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. Despite everything, I didn't want my father to hurt. I'm not, he said, which surprised us all. I'm relieved, like waking up from a dream where you can't quite remember who you are. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, Grandpa said. I felt the same way after particularly bad firefights. Like I'd been someone else for a while and was just finding my way back to myself. We moved to the living room after dinner, bringing pie and the good whiskey Grandpa had insisted on packing. The formal space became almost comfortable with us in it, like we were teaching it how to be a home instead of a showcase. I need to apologize, Dad said suddenly. Not just for today, but for all of it. For letting Veronica come between us. For choosing her family over mine. For being embarrassed by the people who gave me everything. We know, Grandma said simply. And we forgive you. Just like that. Just like that. She smiled. Though if you ever ban us from Thanksgiving again, I'm writing you out of the will. I make excellent pie, and that recipe dies with me. Noted, Dad said, managing a small smile. What happens now? Now? Grandpa looked around the ridiculous mansion. Now you decide who you want to be. David Harrison, son of James and Eleanor, or David Ashford adjacent, forever trying to be someone you're not. I don't think I can afford to keep this place without Veronica, Dad admitted. The mortgage alone is more than I make in 6 months. So sell it, I suggested. Move back to Denver. Start over. You're only 58, Dad. That's young enough to build a different life. A real life, Grandma added, with Sunday dinners and random visits and family who actually likes being around each other. We stayed until nearly midnight, cleaning up and talking and slowly rebuilding the bridges that had been burned. When it was time to leave, Dad walked us to the car, looking lost. You could come back with us, Grandma offered. Stay for the weekend. Your room is still there. My room was converted to your craft space 15 years ago, Dad pointed out. The couch pulls out, she countered. And it's better than rattling around this museum by yourself. He looked back at the mansion, then at us, and made a decision that would have been unthinkable 12 hours earlier. Let me pack a bag. The drive back to Denver was different from the drive out. Dad sat in the back with Grandma, looking younger than I'd seen him in years despite the gray in his hair. They talked quietly, mother and son reconnecting after a year of careful distance. Grandpa dozed in the passenger seat, occasionally waking to offer navigation advice I didn't need. We reached Lakewood as the sun was rising, painting the mountains in shades of gold and pink. The modest ranch house looked warm and welcoming after the Connecticut mansion, like the difference between a home and a hotel. Looks good, Dad said softly. Looks like home. It is home, Grandma said. Always will be, for all of you. We stumbled inside, exhausted but somehow energized. Grandpa made coffee while Grandma started on breakfast, because apparently feeding people was her love language and we'd only been fed 12 hours ago. Dad sat at the kitchen table, the same one where he'd done homework and eaten thousands of meals, looking around like he was seeing it for the first time in years. I forgot, he said. Forgot what? I asked. How this felt. Being home. Being loved without conditions or requirements or social standards. Just loved. We never stopped, Grandpa said, setting a mug in front of him. Even when you made it hard. That's what family does. I don't deserve it. Probably not, I agreed, earning a look from Grandma. But deserving's got nothing to do with it, remember? We love you because you're ours, not because you've earned it. When did you get so wise? Dad asked. Genetics. I come from good stock. I raised my mug in a toast. To family, the real kind. To family, we echoed. for generations of Harrisons around a table that had seen better days but was still standing, still strong, still ours. The weeks that followed were complicated. Dad's divorce proceeded with expected ugliness. Veronica wanted everything, including things that had belonged to my mother. But for once, Dad fought back, not with anger but with dignity. He hired a good lawyer, protected what mattered, and let go of what didn't. The Connecticut house sold quickly, even in divorce. The proceeds, split between Dad and Veronica, left him with enough to start over but not enough to pretend he was something he wasn't. He moved back to Denver, finding a modest townhouse not far from his parents. Close enough for Sunday dinners, far enough to maintain independence. "It's strange," he told me one evening as we helped Grandpa build new shelves for Grandma's craft room. "I spent so much time and money trying to become someone important. Turns out I was important all along, just to different people." "The right people," Grandpa corrected, not looking up from his measurements. "That's what matters." Christmas that year was everything Thanksgiving should have been. We gathered at my grandparents' house. All of us, including Dad's sister Sarah, who flew in from Portland with her family. The house was crowded, noisy, imperfect, and absolutely wonderful. "This is what I missed," Dad said, watching his nephews play with toys that had been his as a child. "This is what I traded for crystal and china and people who measured worth in market value." "Well, you're here now," Grandma said, pressing another cookie into his hand. "That's what counts." I found myself thinking about the trajectory that had brought us here. How a banned Thanksgiving had led to a thrown gravy boat, a divorce, a long drive to Connecticut, and ultimately a family reunited. Sometimes the worst moments become catalysts for the best changes. "Hey," Dad said, pulling me aside. "I never thanked you." "For what?" "For calling me out. For protecting them when I failed to. For being the son I should have been." "You're being that son now," I pointed out. "That's what matters." "Think they'll ever really forgive me?" "For all of it." I looked at our grandparents, Grandma teaching Sarah's daughter to knit, Grandpa showing the boys his workshop. They'd welcomed Dad back without reservation, without holding the past over his head. That was their gift, the ability to love forward instead of backward. "They already have," I said. "The question is whether you'll forgive yourself." "Working on it," he said. "Every day working on it." A year later, at Thanksgiving, we gathered again. This time at Dad's townhouse, which had slowly transformed from a temporary landing spot to a real home. He'd actually cooked, with Grandma's guidance and recipes. The turkey was slightly dry, the rolls a little burned, but it was perfect in its imperfection. "A toast," Grandpa said, raising his glass. At 90, he moved more slowly, but his spirit remained undiminished. To banned Thanksgivings that lead to better ones. To gravy boats that needed throwing. To families that find their way back to each other. To second chances, Dad added. To not needing third ones, I said, which earned me a laugh. To being together, Grandma said simply. That's all that matters. We clinked glasses, nice ones, but not Ashford nice. Harrison nice, which meant they were sturdy enough to survive being dropped and simple enough to replace if they didn't. Like us, I suppose. Built to last, designed for use rather than show. The doorbell rang as we were serving pie. Dad looked confused. Everyone who mattered was already here. He opened the door to find a delivery driver holding a small package. David Harrison? Yes. Sign here, please. Dad brought the package to the table, examining the return address with a frown. It's from Veronica's lawyer. On Thanksgiving? Grandma disapproved. What kind of person sends legal documents on Thanksgiving? Dad opened it carefully, pulling out a small box and a note. His face went through several expressions as he read. finally settling on something like wonder. "What is it?" I asked. He opened the box, revealing a familiar piece of china. A shard actually carefully preserved in tissue paper. "It's a piece of the gravy boat, the one I threw." He read from the note. "David, my client wanted you to have this as a reminder. Some things need to be broken before better things can be built. She wishes you well. Happy Thanksgiving." We stared at the china shard, this fragment of a marriage that had been built on appearances rather than substance. "Well," Grandma said finally, "I suppose even Veronica learned something from all this." "What should I do with it?" Dad asked. "Keep it," Grandpa suggested. "Put it somewhere you'll see it. Let it remind you that breaking the wrong things isn't always bad if it helps you build the right things." Dad nodded, carefully placing the shard on his mantel next to a photo from that Christmas. All of us crowded into Grandma's living room, laughing at something lost to memory but preserved in joy. As we finished our pie and settled into the comfortable rhythm of family together, I found myself grateful for that banned Thanksgiving 3 years ago. Not for the pain it caused, but for the truth it revealed and the changes it sparked. Sometimes families need to break before they can heal stronger. "Same time next year?" Dad asked as we prepared to leave. "Wouldn't miss it," I said. "Though maybe with less drama?" "Where's the fun in that?" Grandpa asked. "Besides, we're Harrisons. We do everything the hard way first. Then we learn," Grandma added. Eventually, we agreed, and headed out into the night, full of turkey and pie and the kind of love that survives banning and distance and thrown china. The kind that shows up with casseroles and forgiveness when you least deserve it but most need it. The kind that drives 4 hours on Thanksgiving because family doesn't leave family alone, even when they've earned it. The kind that matters. The china shard still sits on Dad's mantel, a conversation starter for those who don't know the story and a reminder for those who do. Sometimes I catch him looking at it, and I know he's remembering not just what was broken, but what was built from the pieces. That's the thing about family, real family. It's not the perfect dinners or the formal occasions or the careful poses for Christmas cards. It's the showing up when showing up is hard. It's the forgiveness when forgiveness seems impossible. It's the decision to love people not for who you wish they were, but for who they are and who they're trying to become. It's Thanksgiving at a scarred kitchen table that's seen 7 decades of life, surrounded by people who choose each other every day, even the difficult days. Especially the difficult days. It's coming home, even when home is complicated. It's family. Messy, imperfect, unbreakable family. And that's something to be thankful for. Thank you for listening to my story. If you're like me, someone who spent years trying to earn love that was never truly offered, you know these aren't just stories. They're mirrors of our deepest wounds and greatest triumphs. Subscribe if these stories resonate with your journey. Hit that notification bell. Think of it as our regular meetup, where we share truths that others might not understand. And please, leave a comment below. Tell me, have you ever felt like an outsider in your own family? What would you have done in my shoes? Your words matter to me, and they matter to everyone here who's walked this lonely path. Tomorrow, I'll be back with another story. Until then, remember, family isn't always blood, and sometimes the greatest gift is discovering who you truly are. Take care of yourself. You deserve it.